Hey everyone, Spaceman Spiff here, and today I'm going to be bringing you some gameplay footage from the Thursday Throwdown. I ended up 2-1 with my fire-ranged Shigaraki deck, and I just wanted to take some time to go over my lines and show you why I did the things that I did, maybe give some perspective on how I play the game. Real quick, I'm going to go over the deck. If you need a more in-depth view, you can go to my channel and see the deck there. So to start off, we have the ranged Todoroki package as our attack base. It's supplemented by Monster Blast for Foundation Destruction and 2 Decaying Grip just as an extra bit of defensive Foundation Destruction. The deck is mostly built around the Foundation in the Typhoon for defense, and we use the card draw from Calling for Backup and Self-Assured to keep our hand full. Our sideboard includes 2 Fulfilled My Duty, 2 extra Decaying Grips, 4 Explosive Pride for Momentum Hate, and 2 plus ultras just in case we go up against a big speed deck or something like that. And without further ado, let's get into the games. So right off the bat, we have 3 attacks in our opening hand. We're going to go ahead and ship both of those back. We'll draw 3 new cards, and we see a really great start with 5 foundations and 1 attack that we can pitch to review because we are on the draw. So our opponent's going to start off with 6 foundations here, which is actually really insane. We really rely on squeezing our opponent of their resources, and he just gets the absolute nuts here with his start. We go ahead and we pitch our attack. We draw 2 new cards, and we try and sequence out as best we can. We play our most important foundations first, and then we go down from there. I decide not to play the other mid, just because I can keep that on the board, and if it does pass, I can keep a mid and a low block in my hand. So our opponent untaps, they draw new cards, and they're going to start off with an Engine Rush, really strong attack. But I'm secretly super stoked about this because I have a great mid block in my hand that's also Breaker 1. So not only do I have the matching block for Shigaraki, but I'm also going to breaker them, and that's going to probably stop their aggression here, I'm thinking. So my opponent opts to just straight up end the enhanced step with his ability, so we don't really do anything. Just fine by me. I didn't have anything to do anyway. I go ahead and try and block on an 8. I check a 3, but I have enough anyway. It does mean that I can't actually blow up one of his foundations, but I do at least get to breaker him. And I'm rewarded for that when he checks a 3 on his now 6 check attack. And he does pass it, but he does have to tap out pretty hard here. He goes and he taps 3 foundations. And he starts off by giving it speed with Eraserhead, discarding Erase, and just picking it right back up for +2 speed. Then he can give it +2 damage because of Flying Thruster Kick's ability. None of this matters because I have no way to block this anyway. I'm all tapped out. But he goes, he gets a hit in, takes me down to 22, and that guarantees that he's going to have at least a little bit of momentum to use for a Recipro Burst later on. He goes for a Fulfilled My Duty on a 4, checks a 6, he's good, and a Calling for Backup also on a 4, checks a 5, he's good. So my opponent has 8 foundations in play at the end of turn 2, and that's a lot. We're still Shigaraki, we're going to get to blow some up, and we'll get to be a little bit selective about him, but he's going to start off with a lot. We draw a really aggressive hand here, 4 attacks, and I opt to start off with a giant ice wall to try and tap down some of his foundations. Since he went ahead and tapped 3 of him down, trying to attack us, I think I might have an opening here. So first thing I'm going to do is stun him. He taps the Gotcha, which can respond to give my attack -1 speed. We go ahead and add that. And then he is going to discard his Erase again and pick it back up for -2 speed, which is something that Eraserhead gets to do on every attack, offensive and defensive, +2 or -2 speed. It's a lot, but that's what Eraserhead's good at. He's really good at speed control. So this attack is probably not going to get through, but I have a couple of other attacks coming, so that'll be alright. He goes ahead and full blocks it. I really like when my opponents block with their attacks. It means that they're not attacking me with them. So I go for a Giant Ice Wall on a 6, check a 3. It's really unfortunate, But this is kind of the nice part about In the Typhoon is that I can leave that back solely, and if I need to, that can block for me. So even though I am way overextended and I only have 2 foundations to even play in general, I still feel kind of safe. Like, he's not going to kill me. He goes ahead, he gives it -2 speed again, and I stun to him, tap him out almost entirely, but he discarded a late riser to give an extra -2 speed to this attack. So this is also super slow. He does have a block, but it's a half block. He's just trying to stop future aggression with the breaker 1. So he checks it. It's at -1 speed, so it's pretty easy to check. He takes half damage. I respond with Shigaraki for an extra 5, and then he responds with breaker 1. After that, I go ahead and I play my 1-cost foundation, and it checks, and my keen observation, and that checks, and I pass the turn with 2 cards, 2 attacks in hand, and 3 foundations up. So I'm really looking to full block him here, blow up one of his foundations, and hopefully it's a mid attack so that I can breaker 2 with Ice Storm. That's my best line. And luckily, he plays a nice mid attack against me. Reciprocal Extend is a really good attack. It's one of the strongest attacks in the kick package. It draws a card and it makes your other attacks better, but I really like seeing it here because it itself does not actually have that much speed. So he can give it +2 speed with his Erase, which is what he does, and he gives his next attack +2/+2, and he draws his card. He gives this attack +2 speed, so it's going to be a 6 mid for 4. I really want to try and block this, not to block the 2 damage, but just because I know that it's a mid attack that I'm going to be able to full block and get a foundation out there. So that's what I do. I go ahead and I block on an 8. I check the 5, which I really needed, and I commit out all my foundations. And now I'm kind of wide open, but I just blew up one of his foundations and I breaker 2'd him. So his next attack is going to be +3 difficulty with 1 progressive and 2 breaker. My opponent is deciding which foundation to destroy. He opts for calling for backup, which I kind of disagree with. The card draw, even in a 7-hander that plays a bunch of cantripping attacks, is super key. You just draw so many cards with this deck, and that's the strong suit. I think I probably would have rather just gotten rid of a gotcha, since you don't have any ways to really affect that yourself, and the speed on my attacks is pretty irrelevant, since he can just give everything -2 anyway. He goes for another Reciprocal Extend, checking a 5. He does have to tap 2 foundations down because of the breaker 2, and it comes in with +2 speed and +2 damage. He gives it an additional +2 speed with Erase, and there's nothing I can really do here. So I just sit here and take this. So I go down from 22 to 16, and I wait to see what his next attack is. My opponent makes a really brave move and goes in with Reciprocal Acceleration Kick. This kick is really great, but I don't think he's in a position to actually finish me off here. So if he had checked a 3 here, that would have been really punishable. His turn would have absolutely ended. But he does pass it. He goes ahead and he takes the 2 kicks out of his pool to pay for the EX ability, giving this just an ungodly amount of speed, which is totally irrelevant because I can't block anything anyway. And I get a little nervous as I take 16 down to 8 and hope that my opponent can't finish me off with his next attack, because there's nothing I can do about it. Luckily for me, my opponent doesn't have any extra attacks, and he opts to play a Tape on a 2, which passes, and a Night Watch on a 4, which checks a 3, and he commits 1 down for it. Night Watch is really good because it stops in the Typhoon as well as basically any other non-character enhance that I have, and it's going to be really key. But luckily, I have lots of ways to deal with it by just blowing up a particular foundation. I go ahead and draw a fresh 6. This is not a very good hand. 2 Decaying Grips is pretty much the worst attacks that I can draw. I can only combo 1 of them. I only play 2 in the deck, and the combo is not particularly great, although it does guarantee at least some damage going through, but in this case, it's not enough to be lethal. My opponent would have to block neither of them and just take the whole thing, which is not going to happen against Eraserhead. So instead, I opt to build out. My opponent has 4 cards in hand, and since there's no way these are getting through, I decide I'm just going to build, and I'll play a little bit of defense. I play one of my In the Typhoons and a Cruel Student, which can help me pass checks with my 1 momentum, and I pass the turn. My opponent reviews 1 foundation from their hand, goes ahead and draws a fresh 4 cards, and he starts his turn. First attack out for my opponent is Flying Thruster Kick on a 4. He checks a 6, passing. This attack is really good. It's just a cheap attack that's basically a 6 high for 6 because he can always give it the speed with Erase as he does. I don't have any actual enhances here, so I pass. But when he gives it the damage, I give it -3 speed with Heroic Lineage because I do have a high block in hand. Remember, you basically always want to fire off the first block, full block that you can, just so you make sure that you get your Foundation Destruction for the turn. So he doesn't have anything else. I go ahead and I drop the high block. It's going to check on a 5. I get a 3. Never lucky. And I go ahead and commit 2 foundations. I go ahead and respond with Shigaraki. He blows up Mediator. And he still has 8 foundations in play. He definitely started this game off with a good advantage. He goes for a Reciprocal Burst here. And I'm going to totally bait him because there's no way this guy knows what In the Typhoon does. Nobody knows what In the Typhoon does. Nobody's playing this card right now. So I'm going to go ahead and try and get him to pump some speed into this and then just pitch 2 cards to In the Typhoon. So first thing he does is draws a card with Calling for Backup. Probably still digging for attacks. I'm only at 8 here, so he probably thinks he has lethal. I go ahead and I pitch 1 momentum to give my next check to play a card +2. And what I was really hoping to accomplish here was get him to think that I was going to try and block it. And he kind of does, but he surprises me by blowing up his Night Watch to cancel that ability. So now I'm free and clear for In the Typhoon, which I thought I was going to have to discard my whole hand to do, because I could have popped back one of my foundations, the Precise Control, back to my hand for an additional +2 cards in my hand. But he goes ahead and blows the Night Watch on that, and then he stuns me, and I stun the now useless Cool Student. He responds for another speed, and now he's going to go ahead and discard 1 momentum for the EX3. And now I've got him. I go ahead, I pop my In the Typhoon immediately. You see me do it real quick. And I discard my 2 cards. And now my opponent's like, wait, what? What's that do again? Nobody knows what this card does. And luckily for me, he does not have an extra attack. He goes and he plays another Night Watch, which he needs to commit 1 to do as he checks a 3 for a 4. And he goes for Tape for another 4, checks a 5, it passes, and he goes ahead and builds those down. So now he has another Night Watch that I need to look out for, but I'm alive for another turn. And In the Typhoon is what kept me alive. That card is really strong. I go ahead, untap everything, clear my card pool. I don't have any review here because I want to keep this attack in hand. And I draw a really awful hand again. 3 dinky mid attacks that I can't really do anything with. I look at my options. I decide that I need to at least try to poke. And I can at least try and draw a card with Calling for Backup and see what I draw. So I go ahead, I flip it, I draw my 1 card, and it looks like the My Hero Gods have smiled upon me as I draw the perfect attack, a low attack with Stun 2. So I go ahead and he ends the enhanced step to try and save his foundations, some of his other foundations, probably the Night Watch, and then he blocks with an Erase on a 5, checks a 5, and responds with Breaker 1. This was a really good play by my opponent. He saves his Night Watch, he Breaker 1s me, and I didn't actually get to play my blow up ability. So I just played the other one. Unfortunately for him, I had the second one. It would have gone a lot better for him if I didn't. I check off 6 when I needed a 5, so it passes. And my opponent is going to discard another late riser, which is really good. Drawing those is really good when you're trying to discard stuff. And he picks up his erase, gives it -4 speed. So this is definitely getting blocked. And I go ahead and give this 2 speed. I think this is actually a mistake because my opponent can just take this, but he just cancels that ability anyway. And it stays in my card pool, which actually was a really good play for my opponent. I think I messed up, but him blowing up the Night Watch, it was both good for my opponent and good for me. Because he could have just taken this, and then I could have blown up one of his foundations, and he would not have been dead from this damage. But he goes ahead and blocks with resistance, checks a 3, which does not do him any good. But he only has to commit 1, and he breaker 1s me. And this puts me in a really rough spot because there's no way that I can play this 5 cost attack now on a 9. Even if I check a 5, I still have to commit out 4 foundations. And even if I do that, the 5 damage isn't going to be lethal because Keen Observation can't deal the last point of damage. So instead I opt to build out here. I go for Self-Assured on a 6. Unfortunately, I check a 3. I think about tapping out for it. Self-Assured is really good. It does let me change the zone around, which is really good defensively, but I just can't pay 3 for that. I'm going to need all the foundations I can to block because I am almost dead. I am pretty much any of his attacks can kill me from here. He goes ahead and draws a fresh hand of 7 and starts off with the absolute best card he can ever start off with, Reciprocal Extend. He checks a 3 when he needed a 4, so he commits 1 down. I'm already off to a good start there. He goes ahead and draws a card immediately. And really good play for my opponent. He uses Erase to seal my In the Typhoon so that I can't use it. Definitely this deck is not where In the Typhoon really shines. He has many ways to deal with it. But even then, I mean, I did get him with it at least once, but that was more of a surprise thing. If your opponent is ready for it, it can be a little easier to play around, especially with a character like Eraserhead. So he gives his next attack +2/+2. And then he actually forgets to give this +2 speed, or he didn't want to for some reason. And I go ahead and block with my Decaying Grip. First, I make him sacrifice a foundation. I think he thought he could do that one for a second, but he doesn't. He goes for Gotcha, and then I get to untap Shigaraki. And this is probably not super useful, and he doesn't even go for a second attack. He actually just plays out some foundations because he knows that he's dead on the crackback if he does anything too crazy. And luckily for him, he didn't do that because he actually had 3 attacks on top of his deck, and he cycles for the first time. So it looks like the reason that he didn't give his attack +2 speed is that he wanted to hold on to an Erase in hand because he knew that he wasn't going to get another opportunity. So looking back, actually I should have known that there wasn't another attack coming. I go ahead, draw a new 6, and this is a great hand for finishing my opponent off. Monster Blast into Ice Wall is going to put him down 3 foundations, and unfortunately I don't have another momentum to give my next attack stun to again, but I'm going to be playing an attack into every zone, and he better be prepared for it. I also have an Evil Gaze in order to force through a bit of speed if I want to. And my opponent's going to go ahead and flip his tape to give this attack -2 speed. Because, well, he needs to block it. So he does that. He gives this -2 speed. And then I announce that my next attack is low. I'm going to blow up one of his foundations. He probably realizes there's another attack coming. And he goes ahead and tries to block. He goes with Coordinated Effort, which is going to check on a 4. He checks a 5, and it's fully blocked. I throw down a Giant Ice Wall on a 6, check a 5, thankfully, commit one of my face down foundations because it has no use to me, and then my trigger goes on the stack from Monster Blast, and I decide which foundation I want to blow up. I end up going with Heroic Lineage because it's his best foundation, and I do plan on trying to give damage to my Frigid Heatwave in hand, and he could use that for -3 speed. He could also use Mediators for -3 speed, but he has to blow them up to do that as opposed to just tapping. So this way, if he does block it, he at least has fewer foundations to work with on the next turns, if there is more. I make a bit of a misplay here. I go for Evil Gaze because I was kind of like focused on it and if I should use it or not, and I do go down to 4 life. It's not that I shouldn't have cast Evil Gaze, it's that I should have stunned him. I just totally missed my ability to stun him for some reason. But I do give it +2 speed, and we'll see if he has a low block, which he does. And it's going to check on a 9. This would have been really good if he had been stunned. He commits 4 foundations, and then I get to blow up one of his foundations, and I blow up the tape because it honestly doesn't really matter. At this point, he has 3 and they all kind of do nothing. I play on a 7, I check a 5, and I go ahead. I commit 2 foundations, and then all I have to do is see if I can give this +2 damage. That's all I need. Well, and for him not to block. But the blocking is kind of less likely here because he's been out of races. I checked 2 attacks. I accidentally put a 4 down here, but that's not actually what it was. It was a 2. It doesn't matter because my opponent only has a low block. And I realized my mistake, put it back to a 2, but again, doesn't matter. So we go on to game 2. So in between games 1 and 2, I get to sideboard. I'm looking through my sideboard right now, and I'm going to bring in 2 Exploding Prides. I end up bringing in the third 2. First, I cut 2 Decaying Grips from my deck. It doesn't really do a whole lot against Eraserhead. He gives so much speed that I don't often get to block more than one of his attacks. It's pretty rare, actually, that I get to fully block 2 of his attacks. So it's, even though he has a couple of good mid attacks, I don't really block that many. So I cut those. I end up cutting 1 Giant Ice Wall as well to bring in a 3rd Exploding Pride. Giant Ice Wall is good against him, but it's a 5 cost attack, and Exploding Pride being a 4 difficulty on top of everything that I want, low and ranged, is just a good upgrade of Giant Ice Wall. So just as a one-of, you still want the stun to help break through his defenses, so I still keep most of him in, but Exploding Pride is really good. So looking at our opening hand, I go ahead and get rid of 2 of my attacks. This is a really strong opening hand. I really like seeing In the Typhoon in all of my opening hands. We have a really great curve, 3, 2, 1, 0, and then just YOLOing out a 1. So this is a potential 5 build right here, which is really good. We're on the draw again, so we'll get to draw an extra card and have 2 cards in hand, including the -speed from Evil Gaze, which can be really good on your first attack. So my opponent builds Heroic Lineage, checks, and then a Resistance, checks, a Late Riser, checks, and that's it. 3 foundations. That is not a lot. My opponent mulliganed twice and did not end up keeping a good hand here. So this is unfortunately probably going to be over pretty quickly. That's a really good start. I end up keeping the 1 foundation in my hand because I forgot to draw my extra card, unfortunately, like a goober. So I need to keep a block in hand so that I can really punish this build from my opponent. If he attacks at all, he accidentally drew too many cards, but he's going back. If he attacks at all and I can block it, then I can blow up 2 of his foundations, and that is going to really set him back. So we'll see what he plays first. And he starts off with High Engine Kick, which is really unfortunate. We don't have a high block in hand. Maybe if I had drawn my extra card, we could have really punished this. He does check a 3 on it, though, which puts him down 1 foundation for this turn, which is really good. And it's going to open up a really kind of risky line for me that you'll see in a little bit. But he discards an attack from his hand to give this 4 speed. And basically what I'm currently debating is using Evil Gaze to give this -2 speed, and if it blocks, then I will destroy one of his foundations, and returning Precise Control back to my hand, and then blowing up in the Typhoon to block this attack automatically, not let him get in any momentum, and destroy both of his foundations. Super risky play, puts me down 2 foundations on board, and if I had drawn the extra card in hand, this really would have punished him, and it would have made In the Typhoon a really great play here, regardless of having to pull a card back from my stage to my hand. But I end up deciding that it's going to actually be worth it, because it puts him down to nothing, and it'll stop him dead in his tracks this turn, and he'll have to spend the rest of his turn building out. I'll have only 2 attacks to attack him back with, but it could be worth it. So I play the Evil Gaze, lose 2 health, it removes itself from the card pool, and then he doesn't really do anything here. He just passes, and then I return Precise Control. Ooh, I zoom my camera out. I return Precise Control to my hand. I now have 2 cards in hand, and then this looks really stupid, but I remove that from the game, discard both my cards. He can't do anything about it, and the attack is fully blocked. So this does trigger the Evil Gaze, so I blow up his Heroic Lineage, and then I commit Shigaraki, and he has to blow up a ready foundation, and he has to lose his resistance. He's checking to see if that's actually legal, and it is. And goodbye resistance. So now my opponent has literally no choice except to build out some foundations. So if he drew a foundation light hand, it could be rough for him, but he goes, he checks. If he had checked a 3 there, that would have been rough, but no, he checks a 5, checks a 3. So he does get his 3 foundation build. I just draw a brand new 6 because I don't have anything to review. And let's see if I can get in a little sneaky hit here. So this hand is so good. I got the Monster Blast and a low attack to follow up with. Now, if I had checked 3s here, this would have been really bad because I would have to tap out entirely for it. But I checked the 5. I actually check a 6 there. I only needed a 4. And then I enhance. If my next attack is low, I'll blow up a foundation. And he goes ahead, blocks with Breaker. It checks. He has to commit out here. He only checks a 3. But he does get to Breaker me. So this is pretty risky. If I check a 3 here, it's really bad. But it's worth it because no matter what, I get to blow up a foundation, even if I check the 3. But I don't. I check the 5. And it's on a 6 because of Breaker. And then I have to decide which one I want to blow up. Night Watch is better against most of my deck because it stops in the Typhoon even after I've removed the foundation and discarded my cards. So it's really, really good against in the Typhoon. And it also can stop a little bit of my other, like it's really good against Evil Gaze. It keeps the card in the card pool. I still lose the life. But I end up going with Heroic Lineage because it's untapped, and I really don't want him to block this. I really do want to take this opportunity of him being entirely tapped out to get in my free damage because the extra 5 off of my character is just so much. So he ends up discarding an attack to pick up Erased. It's a Recipro Burst. That's pretty good for him to discard that. He gives it -2 speed. So it is only a 2 low, but you know, I gotta risk it. Oh, he checks with, or he blocks with Erase on a mid, so it's a half block. And he does actually get it, but he still does take a significant chunk of damage. And he Breaker Ones me. So this could still be rough. If I check bad here, I could end up with not very many foundations in play. But we'll see what happens. So I got to decide what foundation I want to play. I go for the 2. It's risky, but even if I check a 3, I can commit my character, so I will still at least get it. And Self-Assured is really good in this deck. It changes their zone. It checks, draws cards. I have to commit 1 on Precise Control, and I get the extra calling for backup in play. So I'm passing with 3 foundations. He's got 3 foundations. So you'll notice here that even though I removed my own foundation from the game and bounced the foundation back and discarded my whole hand, I'm still up on foundations compared to him, even though he was on the play here. So even though you do blow up a lot of your own stuff, you do have a really weird playstyle, you do get ahead. You can still squeeze them out on resources. He plays Reciprocal Extend, checks a 5, gives his next kick attack +2/+2. This attack is really good. It's just got so much output. Drawing a card, giving another attack +2/+2. If you have another attack, it's basically 6 speed and damage worth of stats spread out over 2 cards, and you draw a card. So it is literally the best card that this deck can start off an attack chain with. So he gives it +2 speed, picking up Erase. He does discard an attack here, which makes me think that he's not actually trying to go for very many attacks here, which makes sense. He doesn't have very many foundations. He does need to build out. That is how Eraser gets ahead here, is by just building out. If he doesn't plan to go for another attack here, though, he probably should have just built out, but that's okay. So I end up taking the damage. I don't have a mid block. I could have potentially like pulled back my either my precise control or changed the zone with self-assured, but I'm unlikely to block a 6 speed considering I have a 2 high in hand. And there's no way I'm blocking this either. So I end up just taking the 7. He didn't commit to draw a card, so, but he's all tapped out, so he's not going to at least draw off of it. So now he has to build. He has no choice. He goes for Heroic Lineage on a 4, checks a 5. He's good. Next up, he goes for a Tape on a 4 again. Checks. He's good. And he just builds those 2 down. This is why once you've started to constrain the resources of your opponent, it's really hard for them to get out of that because they have to attack. They have to apply pressure. Like, he needs that momentum if he's ever going to like kill me. So he has to try and attack. And that just makes building out even harder because you have to, have some foundations ready for defense. You don't want to just waste the cards in your hand. But I drew my Exploding Pride, which is really good here. He's got two momentum. This is a really good hand. I've got 3 attacks. I might be able to actually kill him here. I immediately check a 3, so I commit 1 foundation. And then my first enhance here is going to be to flip Calling for Backup and draw a card. So I do that, flip, and then I draw a card. It's my first enhance, so I don't have to discard. I'm fishing for probably just another attack, but you just want to keep as many options as you can open. But I don't draw another attack. I actually take a 6 check off my deck, which, you do it anyway, but it does suck that that's what came up. So he's currently doing the math. I think he's checking to see if the 2 damage off of Exploding Pride is going to trigger. It definitely doesn't. But he's doing the math because if he takes the 2 here, then he goes to 10, and then this doesn't kill him, so he can actually just take this attack entirely. So maybe I should have led with something else, but the 2 damage can't kill him anyway. It can't deal lethal damage. It's like Keen Observation. It can't deal lethal damage, so I think this is still the right play to lead off with because he's just got no choice but to take it. So, and he does. He takes the 2 damage, and then he decides that he's just going to take the 3, and then the 5, and this should put him down to 2. And now I've got to decide what attack to go with next. I go for Ice Storm because it's another low attack. I'm trying to get them out of his hand. I can swap the Frigid Heatwave to low if I need to, but this also can't be blocked by attacks. So it's just an extra form of evasion here. I need a 5. I check a 3. So I go ahead and commit out. And then we'll see if he has a block. And he ends up not actually having a block for this. He's got no lows in hand. So he's going to switch it to a mid with Tape. And then I go ahead. It tells me he doesn't have a low block. So I switch it to a low with Self-Assured. And he doesn't actually have a low block in hand. So he scoops. And this was a really good game. There was a lot of back and forth. It showed a lot of good key points to the deck. Like the second game really showed how you can constrict their resources, really like put the squeeze on their foundation base. Even doing it to yourself at the same time is a little alright, because even though you're blowing up your foundations, you're blowing up their foundations on their turn. You blow up your foundations on your turn, and then you get to untap and build. You're blowing up their foundations on their turn. They have to play out the rest of their turn without those foundations, and they have to block on their turn without those foundations. So it's a little bit lopsided, even though it looks like you're going 1-for-1. Now, Eraserhead does theoretically have an answer to you in that he can erase your ability to deal the 5 damage. That didn't come up in this particular match. It did come up in my next match, round 2, where I went up against another Eraserhead. I'm not going to show that here because it's just another Eraserhead game. I did win that one, even though he was erasing me, because he has to spend cards to do that, and then he's just not blocking. He doesn't have enough cards to play foundations and erase your ability and block. Like, he has to pick between all of these different things that he's trying to do. So it is actually pretty good against Eraserhead. There's a couple characters that I found that this deck isn't very good against. Kirishima can be tricky sometimes because he can usually have really good blocks for you, so he is sometimes hard to kill in a timely manner. I did end up losing in round 3 to an Ochako deck that was just played really well. They were very close games. I accidentally forgot to hit record on that one, or I probably would have shown that game as well, but I just forgot to hit record, unfortunately. So they were really close games. I did end up losing, but the deck actually performed pretty well. There's not a lot of Shigarakis going undefeated at these events, but I think that he does have potential. I don't think that Death is the best symbol to build him on, even with the new support that he got from Ochako, the float combo card that deals 1 damage even if they block. It's nice. It does give you a reliable way to get that 5 damage through, but being able to reliably get in 6 damage is just not as impressive as being able to get a full attack through and draw cards, and the card pool on Death just is nowhere near as good as Fire. You get all of the breaker cards in Fire from Todoroki. You just have a lot more defensive options. Death doesn't really have good defensive options. So while Pillars, the float combo, does play to Shigaraki's more aggressive side, and it might be a better aggro deck, if you're looking to play a more controlling version of Shigaraki, then I definitely recommend this version. There's a lot of synergy. There's a lot of play to it. There's a lot of really cool lines that you can take. There's just a lot of options that you have to play defensively, but at the same time finishing the game in a timely manner, because a lot of defensive decks can't do that. A lot of defensive decks, you go to time and round, it's really hard to get 3 games in, and you know if you draw, that's not a win. But with this deck, you can play defensive and you can finish a game. So I really like this deck. It's a good mix, and it's performed pretty well in general. So definitely give it a shot. I'll be putting out some new content soon. I'll have some more decks out. I'll probably be doing more recordings like this. If you have any feedback on how to do these, definitely let me know. They're kind of hard to make, to commentate on. It's a lot of work to edit, so I can't do them as often. But if you have any feedback, definitely let me know. If you'd like a more like edited version of this, or if you like the sort of like running commentary style, let me know what you guys think, because I'm interested to figure out how to get this information out there in the way that you guys want it. So, yeah, I'll see you in the next video.